Anxiety on Pantheon Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Mark. Today's guest makes me feel free. I can't help that one, and you'll see why in a second, because my guest is Malcolm Bruce. In addition to being the son of legendary bassist Jack Bruce, he is himself quite a gifted and accomplished musician. In this episode, we figure out where we're going wrong. We discuss growing up as Jack Bruce's kid, and when he began writing music and other things. This was so much fun because it was the epitome of a casual chat. We talk about the generational Bruce Baker energy, get a brief history of Cream, and repeatedly bring up spandex for some reason. Malcolm has recently released an album titled Heavenly Cream, and it's a very different type of Cream tribute. It's an acoustic album that really makes you focus on the brilliant songwriting more than the extended jamming of the band. And in addition to Malcolm, the album also features guests like Deborah Bonham, Peter Bullock, Maggie Bell, Joe Bonamassa, Bernie Marsden, Paul Rogers, and a lot more. Malcolm also reveals some other projects that might possibly see the light of day in 2024. So check out the album on Quarto Records, at malcolmbrucemusic.com, or wherever you get music these days. Follow him on Facebook. Instagram and X are at malxbruce. Follow the show at PerformanceANX on Instagram and X. Reach out there or the performanceanxietypod@gmail.com. Buy stuff at performanceanx.threadless.com or contribute to our coffee intake at ko-fi.com/performanceanxiety. And now prepare for more than just a spoonful of Malcolm Bruce on Performance Anxiety on the Pantheon Podcast Network.
Okay. Hi, it's Malcolm Bruce here on Performance Anxiety. I'm here to tell you about Heavenly Cream and also my new solo album, Fake Humans and Real Dolls, which will be out in 2024.
My connection from my phone into my board, just if I connect before a certain point in the chain, I guess, or turning something on, I have to disconnect my phone from everything and then reconnect it, or I won't get any sound.
Is it an iPhone or is it something?
It's an iPhone. Thanks, Apple.
Did you read the small print?
Apparently no. I can't. I don't read anything below 72 points.
I think you sold your soul somewhere along the line, like I did. I'm pretty sure I had an Android to start with. And we made the switch to Apple because of some deal going on, and now, so I can't switch back. It's the best. It's the best. I mean, I'm talking to you through a MacBook Pro, and I do all my music stuff. I run Pro Tools and edit videos, and it's just. I mean, PCs are great. Don't get me wrong. Like if anyone's listening out there, Billy Gates. You're a nice guy, aren't you, Bill Gates? But anyway, that's a whole other story. Don't sue me. Don't sue me, and don't force me to eat genetically modified insects.
Kidding. That's a whole nother podcast episode we could have.
Yes, absolutely. And it's good that people are waking up to it as well.
Exactly. And maybe we should have that podcast. I don't know. We'll talk afterwards.
Let's do it. No, absolutely. Let's do it. I've got some people that I know and people that know people, and we could get a lot of people together for a really interesting podcast in that direction. Well, yeah. And why? Can I ask you why? Why do you call yourself Performance Anxiety? Is it just like an ironic thing, or does it come from something specific?
It's It had multiple reasons to start with, and none of them matter at this point because I've gotten past it all. I started doing this podcast as aside from another podcast I was doing because I'd made some good contacts. It was a sports podcast, and one of the guys I had on was a guy named Rick French, who is on the board of directors and the nominating committee for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He's also... Yeah, he's also.
I know Sherry down there because my dad's inducted. So whenever I go through Cleveland, I sort of send her a little message, and she goes, "Okay, you can come and
Come and see, you come backstage and see Beyonce's pink boots we've got in a drawer, or whatever.
That is amazing.
So yeah, she's lovely. She's always kind of giving me passes inside and stuff like that. So it's been fun. Well, anyway, sorry.
Oh no problem. Well, Rick is a part owner of an advertising firm, French West and Vaughan, but he's also a part owner of a minor league baseball team, the Daytona Tortugas. Who really, it's really cool. He's just such an interesting guy. So when I was doing the other podcast, he came on to talk about baseball, and we kind of got into music. And so when I started doing this podcast, or getting the idea to do this podcast, I reached out to him, and he's helped me reach out to a few people and get the ball rolling, really. So I was thinking of a name. I was like, I'm kind of nervous to talk to some of these people, so I'm going to have a little bit of this, but maybe that's a through line I can have for each of these people is, have you ever gotten performance anxiety, and, what did you do to get over it? But the problem was I constantly forgot to ask people that. And so it never became a through line for anything. But I had already done the RSS feed, made the logo, and I was like, oh, it's too late. So.
But I mean, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because I think we've all experienced anxiety at different times, and then we can overcome it. Yeah. But also, the more you do something, the more comfortable you become. So, if you've never met a famous person before, you might go, "Oh, I'm meeting a famous person. I'm quite shy. I'm a bit anxious. What if I say the wrong thing? They might poke me in the eye or shout at me because they're a famous person." And then the more people of that nature that you meet, you realize that they actually are just kind of normal people too.
Yeah, they just have a different job.
And we can really respect somebody for having great success in life, but great success in life is so subjective as well. I mean, exactly. We have a media and we have all this thing that's constructed that we're supposed to believe in, a narrative or whatever. But the guy, like the homeless guy, and I love it in America. Not love it, the fact that people are homeless, but I love the attitude in America. Like, you're walking down, I was in Philly and I'm walking along the street. Some homeless guy is like carrying his life on his shoulder, and I say, "Hey, how's it going?" He goes, "Oh, great, man. Yeah, I'm doing great. What a beautiful day." And it's like such a positive thing. And just like, wow, man, you've like literally made my day because of your energy, even though the guy's got nothing and he's going to freeze to death in the winter.
Right. Just might literally. Yeah.
You never know where you're going to get that kind of dignity and that kind of energetic strength coming from, whether it's a famous person or a nobody or whatever. All of that stuff's so meaningless, really.
Exactly. Everybody's human. We've all got different experiences, but we all go through some similar experiences as well. And so if you can find something to touch on in an interview here or just in daily conversation, it kind of eases a lot of anxiety for me.
Yeah, and I think the world is changing so much right now. I think all these narratives are kind of everything's coming together, and we're starting to see clearer and clearer, like what is important, what's not so important.
I sure hope so.
And I think we really have to. We're confronted with that, like, without going into it right now because it's for another podcast, but like these kind of sociopathic people that have leveraged themselves into positions of influence and power when we didn't elect them to be telling us what to do and what to eat and how to live and what to inject into our bodies or whatever it is, right?
Exactly.
So, and it's like, wow, are we just going to go, "Oh, well, they told me to just go along with it, so I'll stop thinking about it." And well, there can't be a conspiracy. I mean, they must know what they're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let's just go along with that narrative. Or let's, in a loving way, let's be up for questioning everything, not in a tight, aggressive, angry way, because that's just more of the same, but just in a loving way, self-loving and loving community and the world and other people and respect for boundaries and all that stuff. So yeah, I think we're in a really, really interesting time. And after about 3 cups of coffee, I mean, etc. So there you go.
and just to wrap up that thought, what I've kind of discovered with a lot of people who don't dig into things is that they assume that money equals power equals knowledge. And it almost never works out that way. So.
No, and we have to stand on our own 2 feet. And, it's so imperative right now,
Yeah.
We have to transcend. We have to go beyond what has come before and really discover like what's possible within ourselves and also in terms of what's going on the planet. So, I mean, it's a really, really exciting time, but quite scary on another level that people are just, there's this great Monty Python. I don't know whether you've watched Monty Python. So there's this great one where it's called the Architect Sketch, and they're all going in like with their little models of like a holiday complex, and the guy goes in, okay, so they stand on the conveyor belt here, and they're taken past beautiful paintings of lovely scenes, and then towards the rotating knives, and then,
right.
and they're like, and then
I remember that one.
Knives. It's a good analogy for everything that's going on right now.
It really is. We are living out the old Chinese curse of may you live in interesting times.
Yes, absolutely.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Before you skip over this ad, give me 1 minute. Like most podcasts, I pick sponsors carefully, and I use the products that advertise here. Pure Spectrum CBD is a product that has been really beneficial for me. They have a wide variety of great products that can be used on a daily or as needed basis. I've been using the tincture every day, and it's been wonderful for easing anxiety. And I absolutely love the isolate. I use it instead of acetaminophen or ibuprofen, and it's worked so well for the relief of aches and pains. They also have soaks, lotions, salves, gummies, and more, plus an entire line for fitness recovery. They even have products for your pets. See everything they offer at purespectrumcbd.com. And if you have questions, they're there to help. They helped me when I had no idea where to start. After you fill your cart, use code PERFORMANCEANX for 15% off your purchase. Pure Spectrum CBD, Pure Spectrum CBD, Pure Spectrum CBD. Well, again, thank you for doing this. This has been fantastic so far. It's a pleasure meeting you, and good night. No,
yes, exactly. Goodbye. Great to meet you too, Mark. So let's whatever you want to talk about, we can talk about. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, let's dive into it.
Oh, before we do it, can you tell me who's like grooving behind you? These two.
Oh,
people on stage.
I keep forgetting to change that background. That's the band Pussifer. So
Okay.
it's let me get my everything's backwards. So that's Maynard James Keenan from Tool, and
yes,
that's Karina Round. So Karina Round sings. She's a secondary singer in Pussifer, but she also does a lot of backup singing for Tears for Fears and does her own music. And her voice is insane. But Pussifer is kind of a side. It's definitely a side project for Maynard. And okay, so since we can do more links here, I can email you more links. I'll get into it a little bit. And I want to thank you for following me on Instagram, because that's where this is posted here. I do a lot of concert photography. And
yes, that was you. No, sorry, I'm making the connection. There's some great shots that I had a quick look at whenever it was. Some really lovely shots, actually.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Pussifer does little less heavy rock than Tool. Some they get into a little electronica and all, and they do this. Like their last few albums have had themes, and they did this tour, and it had an alien theme and like Roswell and like Bill, not necessarily Bill Gates, but conspiracy, GMOs and all kinds of weird stuff in this production they do. And since I do a lot of live photography for a local music blog, but also for prior guests on the podcast, like I'll see they'll come into town and I can reach out and like, hey, I'll, if you can get me in with a photo pass, I will give you, all the shots that I edit. So one of the shows that I got was I was able to shoot Pussifer. So funny thing though, I haven't had anybody from Pussifer on yet, but I did have Laura Logic from X-Ray Specs and Essential Logic on through a guitarist, a guy named Rob Marshall. He does this project called Humanist, which is amazing. The guy's an incredible guitarist. I would highly recommend checking that out. He got me in touch with this guy, Kurt Pagan Davies, who is best friends with Karina. He was on tour, just kind of hanging out with Karina at the shows that I was at, because I went to 2 Pussifer shows, but we didn't meet till afterwards. And he got me hooked up with Laura Logic, and then we were going to meet at this Pussifer show, but he had to go back to the UK, and so.
And they're called Humanist.
Well, the original connection was through a band called Humanist, yeah, and he's about to release a new album in 2024, but he was originally in a band called Exit Calm, which is amazing. If you like mid-era Verve. Humanist, not Humanist. Exit Calm, you'll love. Humanist it's like a one-man band, but he does have a lot of guests on, like Mark Lanigan, Black Rebel Motorcycle Club, Richard Sexsmith. Who else? Is Dave Gahan. So he's had a lot of really cool people on his album.
A friend of mine is in Depeche Mode. He's the second keyboard player.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So that's
amazing. Interesting.
That's the long story that will probably get edited out of the podcast.
My ears pricked up because I'm in the middle of making a new record that's going to come out next year, and it's called Fake Humans and Real Dolls. So
yes.
So it's not humanist, but it's got the word human in it.
Yeah.
So, and I'm like, oh no, don't steal my word. It's my word.
Well, I love Rob. And it's funny because I stay in touch with a lot of the guests that I've had on, and Rob is one of the ones that I contact a lot, and he's just such a sweet guy, and his music is beautiful. He just put out a song on the Jeffrey Lee Pierce Sessions album that just came out with Pete and Leah from Black Rebel Motorcycle Club, Stranger in Our Town, and it's just, it's amazing.
I'll check it out. I've sort of heard of him. I mean, I have heard of him, so, but that doesn't mean anything because I'm kind of just sitting here practicing scales on the piano and not talking to anyone. So, well, I might have heard of him. I mean, it doesn't mean anything. If I have,
it's quite possible. Another band.
Is his name Igor Stravinsky? Yeah. If it's not, I have never heard of him.
And before we jump into the last thing, another band you should check out, Modern Guilt. They're in London, so you go check them out.
Oh, okay. We got a lot of that going on.
Oh yeah,
Modern Guilt. That's kidding. A great name too.
They've been on the podcast too. They're awesome. And that was a weird connection because I reached out to Scarlett Page, Jimmy Page's daughter.
I know Scarlett.
Oh, I love Scarlett. She's been on the podcast.
My mom, sorry, just to interject, my mum's best friend, or my mum's friend in the late 60s was Eric Clapton's girlfriend, and that is Charlotte Martin. And then she split up with Eric, got together with Jimmy, and they have Scarlett. So they were together for many years. So I actually was at Charlotte's house. She had a little party about a month ago, and Scarlett was there. So yeah, wow. And Jimmy was there as well. So,
oh my gosh, he's a unicorn. If I could ever get him on the podcast, I could end.
You never know. He's he's a lovely guy. So just reach out to his people.
Here's what's really weird. So I had Scarlett on because I went to college for photography. So I wanted to talk to her about that. I said, well, all right, we're going to have to talk a little bit about Jimmy, but it's going to be focused on you. I just want to know a little bit about growing up as Jimmy Page's daughter. I mean, that's crazy. So we had a great talk, and then she suggested that I reach out to Scarlett Sabet, so Jimmy's girlfriend. So I was like, oh, yes. Okay, sure. So I reached out, and she asked Scarlett Page about it. Scarlett's like, oh yeah, it's great. You just talk. He's like, he's not going to focus on Jimmy or anything like that. You just talk about what you do. So Scarlett came on, and Scarlett is the one. So
is she a poet or something?
Yes.
Yeah, she's a writer. Yeah.
So she was the one that introduced me to Modern Guilt, who I had on the podcast a couple months after that. So.
Wow, it's the 6 degrees of separation. It's incredible.
It really is. And they were so awesome they sent me the shirt. So I just got a package in the mail one day, and it was a shirt and an autographed flat. So you guys are awesome. So, but the music's really good too, which is a bonus.
Oh, wow. Check it out.
So speaking of music, I think that's why we're here. And that's we're not trying to figure out how you and I are separated by 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon or anything. So
yes, exactly. Or vegan bacon.
Right. 6 degrees of faking. So you grew up famously as in
How
the
dare you
industry.
say I grew up? I'm still a child.
So,
all right, sorry.
No, this is great. I'm enjoying this. This is one of the best ones so far. So you obviously grew up famously as the son of legendary virtuosic bass player Jack Bruce, and obviously music played a huge role in your life. But was music inevitable for you as a career, or was it something that maybe your parents weren't so excited about you getting into based on their, especially particularly Jack's experiences in the business?
Yeah, I think it was inevitable for me. It's not inevitable for everyone that grows up with a successful parent who's a musician. But yeah, I think I knew from very early on that that's what I wanted to do. That was what I gravitated towards, and I just loved playing music. Got into classical music and studied piano, and still do, and studied composition a little later on. So, it just became my life as well. But it wasn't like my dad was sitting me down saying, you will be a musician.
Or you won't be a musician.
Like it or not. Yeah. Yes, or you will not be a musician. Even if you want to be. No, it wasn't like that. He was just very, and it's one of the things I love about my dad, and that was great about him was that he had a lot of other issues and layers and within his personality, but he was very allowing in terms of people could be themselves, like, I'm not going to tell you what to do. And as a musician, he was very much like that with his own bands and the collaborations that he had throughout his career. He wanted people to discover and find themselves in it, rather than being, some musicians are very controlling, like, okay, you must play that note, you must play it. And at times he could be, when it was something that was important to make a statement about, but the majority of the time he was just a very, find your own way, discover for yourself what it is that you want. And so I don't know, that's my experience of my dad. I think other people will have a different experience. Like, I have a daughter, so I've seen it from the other way round as well. But, it's that thing. It's like, how much does a parent control what a child does as opposed to the child controls what the parent does, or whatever it is,
I know.
It's like if you have a dog, are you the owner of the dog, or is the dog really the owner of you? When it comes down to it, it's probably the dog,
For sure in my house, yeah.
So yeah, it's just, it's hard to define it specifically. I had my whole relationship with my dad, apart from him being my dad, was based around music, and whether we'd be improvising together at home or me helping him with his records, or, I did a little bit of touring with him as well. Yeah. So, and he was just, go out, my son, and find yourself, and don't send me any unpaid bills. Right. Whatever. No, yes, I think it was inevitable for me, but not necessarily for everyone. I guess some people grow up with famous parents, musician parents, and they sort of do the opposite, like maybe
like Scarlett, you mentioned
chartered accounting or something. Politics. Yeah, Scarlett's amazing. She's, and I can imagine it must have been really interesting for you because she's shot some iconic photographs over the years. Album covers and various different things that really have become were from a time when all of that stuff meant something.
Yeah, exactly.
Now I don't think people even, look at anything. They just kind of go on Spotify. And
they scroll.
Just scrolling, man. I was the guy that invented scrolling. Wow.
Oh, I hate you.
Scrolling.
I hate that guy. But so you didn't actually start off playing bass, though. I think you started off on piano and keyboards. That's what you learned first, right?
Yeah, I think I was around 5. I started to have classical piano lessons and did that maybe for a year or two, and then sort of stopped doing it, and then went back to it about the age of 10 or 11.
You got burnt out at 5?
What's that?
You got burnt out at 5 and went back at 10.
It was all those early starts playing scale 12 hours. At 5, it's just inevitable. Like, man, I can't take it.
It's just, I've had enough.
No, I think it was just the discipline some young kids have that discipline and other kids don't. And my parents, I would imagine they didn't want to push me, but I did. I had that kind of grounding. And then subsequent to that, I've really gone into it, and I'm still really going into it at this point. But yeah, around the age of 8, I took up the bass. And then around the age of 9, I took up the guitar, the electric guitar.
Okay.
And then I learned the violin for about 7 years, from the age of 10 to 17.
Oh my gosh. Wow. So you get a little bit of everything going on.
Yeah, I played the sax, the alto sax, for a couple of years as well. And yes, so just exploring it all. But I mean, at this point in time, I really feel like it's my writing that interests me the most, like writing. And then all of these tools are really just the tools to express those ideas, you know. Although I do think I have my own sound on the guitar and my own sound on the bass, a lot of it is to do with the choices I make in terms of what I'm expressing, you know. So yeah, that's the way I'm perceiving it, but I have no idea whether that's just my narcissistic ego talking or whether, you know, I guess that's this is the interesting thing. I find myself, and I guess a lot of kids of famous people find themselves a little bit in the shadow. And so I'm just at this point where I really want to get, you know, my next record come out next year, and I want to really get it out there and promote it properly and see if there's that thing, you know, I've got a sound, I've got a voice as an artist. You know? Yeah. Because I think I do, but I've never found a way to push it out properly into the mainstream. Whereas the things that I've done in tribute to my dad, people have always inevitably been more interested in within the industry so far, you know, because it's a business. You know, we can sell it. But I mean, that's great as well. We can, you know, I think we embrace that in the same way that anybody would embrace it. You know, I'm proud of what my dad achieved. It's incredible. So it's lovely to be able to sort of honor him along the way, which is what this Heavenly Cream record is.
Yeah, exactly. But did you spend a lot of time growing up in the studio with your dad and learning about the studio? Because I was listening to some of the older music, like I'm looking at, and I think your first credit was on Bill Ward's solo album Along the Way. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it was one of the first things. Certainly one of the sort of collaborations with a proper, you know, a major artist.
And that was
that was I was 16, I think.
And that was keyboards too. I mean, that wasn't bass; that was piano.
I think I played a bit of acoustic guitar and piano. I'm on piano on a track with Ozzy Osbourne, which
it's a hell of a way to break in, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting situation because Bill was the drummer in Sabbath, and then got really screwed up with drugs and alcohol and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And then was kind of almost dying, and then turned his life around, you know, incredibly. I have so much respect for him in that regard, you know, that he completely turned his life around and then sort of discovered a real talent not just a drummer, but all this other stuff that subsequently he's achieved. And so I kind of met him through my dad was on that record as well. So I kind of flew over to LA with my dad and I played on that record. But it seemed like it was that period. It was a period of time where Ozzy had, you know, disappeared off the map, as it were. Let's put it like that politely. It's got nothing to do with mirrors and mounds of cocaine, you know, anything like that. No mention of that whatsoever. But, you know, I think that was when Bill was making this record that ended up being Ward One Along the Way, I think it's called.
Yes.
And it's a gorgeous record. It's an amazing record. It's got incredible stuff about it.
Yeah, it really is.
But Ozzy guested on it. And then I believe that as Bill was about to kind of make this record and make major statement with this record, Ozzy and his label came back and eclipsed Bill because Ozzy was the bigger name. And you don't want two records coming out at the same time with Ozzy Osbourne guesting on one, but he's trying to release his new album at the same time. So I think there was a bit of politics that kind of didn't allow Bill to really get that record out in the way that it could have been. Because I think it's a world-class project,
It is.
Heard.
It's fantastic.
But yes, I was a kid. I was like, that was one of the first things I did.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. What I like is going back and listening to your older work is that it kind of follows my musical tastes. Like The Now sounds, in when it came out, 89.
That was a big hit in Japan. I'm serious. I never got any money, but somebody, when I went to Tokyo, said, "Oh, you're famous here." I'm like, okay, cool, man. Can you write me the check?
Awesome. But that's the sound that I loved back then. I mean, that metal, almost like that LA metal.
Well, a lot of that is, to be fair, a lot of that's to do with Rue Phillips, who was the singer in The Now. But also he was one of Bill Ward's sort of chief collaborators on that record. And Rue is from Wolverhampton. He's not really doing music anymore, although he has great voice. And we ended up doing this project Lost City together.
Yes. That's an interesting time where you had that Midlands, Wolverhampton, Birmingham rock scene, and then it all kind of got sort of lifted up and transplanted to Los Angeles. And suddenly you've got like Ozzy and all these people, and Rue was part of that. Like I remember Rue telling me he went with his wife Tracy, and they were living in a tent, on the beach, and they'd gone, right, we're going to go to LA and we're going to make this happen. And he literally somehow connected with Bill Ward, but he just went for it. I mean, it takes some guts to do something like that. Oh yeah.
But yes, I think credit where credit's due. Like a lot of that sound came from Rue's voice. He's got a great voice of that kind of rock kind of style that's not really in vogue anymore.
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, because I still like that stuff. But I grew up with it.
And I think but I also think it could be there's an evolution of it. I think maybe, less spandex, but like still some of those musical elements, because some of the, those musical elements are really, really vital and wonderful, but the spandex has got to go.
Yeah. Keep the sound, ditch the visuals.
Yeah. Well, just keep some of it,
Yeah.
Just from the waist up,
The first time I heard Lost City was when I had Kofi Baker on a while back. And so,
cool.
So doing the research for him, I've discovered Lost City.
Did he have a bowl? Was he eating while he was talking to you, or was he well behaved? Because he's normally like,
broccoli.
I've got to have my broccoli and my eggs at the right time. I love the guy, man, but he's like, he's got to be eating.
He has a routine. He
does have a routine. I have a routine too.
Yeah. He was, but he sent me this is aside afterwards. He's like, "You want to see the video of me get hit by a car?"
Oh my goodness!
I'm like, "Yeah, okay, sure, send it to me." And he did. He sent it to me.
I think he's probably shown that video to. Now, is it the first one or the second one? Because I think he's been hit like at least twice.
I'm not sure. There's a lot of screaming involved.
No, it's awful. It's awful. Like it's awful. But I think, like, I have a feeling that if you're cycling on a push bike on the freeway or whatever, it's a risky business.
It's almost inevitable at some point. If that's part of your routine, you really.
Well, also, like in my experience of driving, even in a car in the US, is a little. We have a lot of accidents in the UK, but I think it's even more extreme in the US. Maybe it's because there's bigger population, or just everyone's driving. There's less public transport. Maybe there's probably a lot of different factors. But I've been in a couple of crashes. I was in one in LA. Some guy just drove. Me and my friend Steve we were driving along, going from Orange County up to Hollywood or wherever it was, and this car rammed us in the back, and then just went like that and just kept going. And it looked like it was a car. It was like the old SNL skit, Adobe, the car made out of clay.
Oh, yeah.
Literally. It was this car that it didn't have a number plate or anything. It was just the kind of weird thing,
Oh my God.
We were okay. I mean, the car was like $1,000 worth of damage or something, but we were we were just shook up a little bit, but no actual physical damage. But yes,
it's crazy. It happens. Yeah, I mean, I get delayed on my way to work at least once a week because of some accident. It's ridiculous. But they haven't improved the roads to go along with the increasing population where I live. So it's inevitable. That's going to be the theme of this show. Everything's inevitable.
The inevitability.
The inevitability of inevitability. Yes. So, all right. So Lost City. Again, I really got into that when I was, researching for Kofi and going back and revisiting it. Again, that's kind of what I grew up listening to. I was in college, I think, when that came out. And so that was about the sound that I was really into. So I wish I had found it back then because I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. I mean, it was a short-lived project for a number of reasons. I love Kofi. He's like my brother, but every time we've tried to do something together, it seems to not last, and I think it might just be that we need to kind of do our own thing, and maybe we'll do something together again at some point. But
maybe it's the Bruce Baker connection, because Cream was the same way.
There's a lot of deep kind of energies going on, or something. I don't know. And sometimes you just have to, stand on your own 2 feet, do your own thing, and maybe once both of us are more established in what we're doing, we can do something, and there's less pressure. But there's always that. I mean, I've just won a court case for the last project I was doing with Kofi, where the manager stole it all from me. And I had to go through litigation for 4 years, won the court case, but we can't, we're having to try and track him down. It's just like, there's something about can happen if you're associated with something that's very successful, and little, like sharks come in, they're kind of swimming around, they're going, how can I manipulate this situation to my own benefit? For them, it never really works out. It might seem to for a period of time, but eventually karma catches up with people. And, we have to do things from a loving place and from a respectful place, because otherwise it's just something will not work. That's my experience. I could be wrong. I mean, there's plenty of examples where pretty evil stuff goes on and they get away with it.
Yeah.
But I don't know that. I think long term, I just don't really think it's sustainable to steal something that doesn't belong to you, and so I try not to do that myself, because I want to be clean and clear and feel good about and be able to sleep at night and all of that kind of stuff.
Like you're saying, it's whether it'll catch up to you, and depending on what you believe in, if it doesn't catch up with you now, it catch up with you afterwards. In this life or the next, I believe it's going to catch up with you at some point. So
I mean, there's subtle levels to experience, aren't there? I mean, a lot of people go through life and they have loads of coffee, and then they smoke loads of cigarettes, and then they drink loads of alcohol, and there's nothing wrong with those things per se. But if they're being used to not experience the subtler energies of the self, then you can kind of just go, all right, I'm going to bulldoze my way through something. I'm just going to be unfaithful to people and lie and do all of these things. And you can get away with it, but eventually, what you're even the karma of that is that you're missing the more intimate, subtler experience, whether it's between you and other people or whether it's with yourself,
Yeah.
So that with even if it doesn't catch up in terms of financial reward or whatever, there's you're going to be missing love, if you behave like that.
Exactly.
But anyway, so yes, me and Kofi it wasn't Kofi's fault, that situation, but it was unfortunate, and it's still ongoing. But anyway, there you go.
So
c'est la vie.
Yeah. All right. So, well, I'm glad you guys won that case. So maybe that stuff can come out at some point. But I do have some questions about what you were doing. So after Lost City, I found some other projects that you're involved in, and I'm trying to figure out some of this stuff because I found a band, Third Degree, which I kind of liked.
Yes.
He found a note today that said she couldn't stay. As he sat down to read her reasons, his heart slowly fell to pieces. He owns a photograph in the 3-page epitaph. How love's as good as dead. He won't forget the words she said. She's gone.
I thought it had a
Great record. Yeah,
it has like an Our Lady Peace kind of feel to it, which I love Our Lady Peace. So I really enjoy that. The dude's voice sounds exactly like Rain Maida, but the only credit I see on that, and it's because it's hard to find, is you on keyboards. I don't know anybody else in the band.
Well, they've wiped themselves off they've wiped themselves. No, there was a really interesting situation. So I was staying in Colorado, in Denver. I was going between Denver and Boulder. I'd met a couple of guys called James and Charles Hambleton. So Charles ended up winning an Oscar for a documentary or something. I can't remember. But, but James was still in that area, and they owned and ran the Fox Theatre and Tulagis, which were two clubs side by side in Boulder. And there was this whole incredible scene. I think something to do with their dad, who had been the president of Pan Am or something. Like, it was one of these crazy stories. They were lovely guys, and they kind of took me under their wing a little bit. So I was staying with them some of the time. And then I was also staying with my friend Jim Bush, no relation to the other Bushes in our reality, but Jim's a lovely guy. He's still around, and he ran a recording studio in Denver, in the sort of, if you know Denver, like the kind of warehousey business district part of downtown.
Okay.
And he had this kind of funky old studio there, and he hooked up with these guys, and there were two brothers and a cousin they were the Johnsons. So it was JP Johnson, who was the lead vocal, Aaron Johnson, and the other Johnson.
Yeah.
And so, but they were like really lovely guys and really talented. And JP was the singer, guitar player, sort of songwriter, and his brother was the bass player, and the cousin was playing guitar. So the cousin went on to have a massive hit record producing The Fray.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He ended up sort of becoming a really big, like Mr. Big, I'm sorry, I can't, I'm not going to answer your email because I'm so big time. No, I'm kidding. He was a lovely guy, but he just became this huge kind of producer. I don't know whether he's still doing stuff. Sometimes people just have one hit as a producer. Yeah. Sometimes they kind of become this huge thing. But anyway, he ended up doing that. But they kind of came from money. So they had a lot of money. Their family had a lot of money, right. And they were just teenagers. But they had kind of, unlimited funds to make this record. So they approached me and Jim, and we tracked the record. Then they flew down. This is Third Degree. They flew down to Nashville and mixed it with one of their bands that they cited as an influence was the Marvelous Three, I think they were called.
Okay, yeah.
And so I think they got the mix engineer that had mixed that band's records to mix their record, and I ended up doing a little tour with them. But then they changed their name to God or Julie. See if you can you Google God or Julie right now?
Or Julie, look it up.
But I mean, as I say, because they're parents or their grandparents had like $642 trillion, in the bank. Maybe they just decided to become like, I don't know, stock exchange, like investors, or they, I don't know, maybe they grew out of this music lark. I mean, they were super talented, but that particular Americana thing that was going on at that time, end of the 90s.
They put out 2 albums.
Okay.
What Doesn't Kill You and This Road Before, one in 2005, one in 2007.
And that's it.
That's it. It's John Paul Johnson and Adam Johnson after they relocated from Denver to New York, and enlisted drummer Aaron Stern and
that's right,
guitarist Matt Hogan.
So if you then check out Aaron Johnson, he was the producer of The Fray, I believe.
Let's see.
He's now like producing, I don't know.
Oh, he's got 21 production credits. Let's see.
Hey, that's a lot, man.
That is. Starting back in 1991 with Capitalist Casualties, The Fray in 2005, The Fray. He's done a couple things. Oh, wait, that's probably a Fray song, because it shows those big compilations. Like, now that's what I call music.
Wow. If you make it on that, you've made it.
He was on 60. Now that's what I call music 66 and 67.
Whoa.
And let's see. So, yeah, he's done a buttload with The Fray. Katie Herzig. I don't know who that is, but.
Sounds good, though.
Yeah. He's stayed.
Yeah. They were all lovely guys, and talented, but I guess it's just a funny game, isn't it? The music business. Like, if you're a musician, then you are a musician for better or worse. And so, like with me, if you Google me, you'll probably see a few things like this. But a lot of the things I've done, you won't see, because they're more under the surface and different sort of areas of the business.
Yeah.
And I also feel like I'm just beginning. Like I'm so excited about my new record next year, but I'm writing opera, and I'm like, there's so many things that I want to do, and I feel like I'm just coming out of the shadow of my dad, and I'm finding my way at this point. I go by my own set of rules, whereas maybe the Johnson brothers and cousin thought, well, if we're 23 years old now, if we haven't made it by now, we better pack up our bags and go back, get a real job, because that's the attitude that some people have, whereas other people would be like, that's who I am. I'm not going to do anything else, for better or worse. If I don't become famous, I don't care, because it's who I am and it's how I express myself. So maybe you should get those guys on your podcast.
Maybe.
Find out what they're doing now. Maybe they could finance my next movie.
Maybe they can sponsor the podcast. Who knows?
Exactly.
And your movie.
Exactly. Well, I haven't got a movie, but I mean, you've got the money, and I'll write one.
Exactly. Let's one thing at a time. Let's finance it first, and then we'll write it.
Yes, exactly.
So at this time, it looks to me like you are working a lot with your dad throughout a lot of your career, and I worked a lot with my dad throughout my life, and in my experience, it's a great experience, but it can also be difficult working with family. But you did so much work with your dad. It seems like all the good experiences must have way outweighed any difficulties you found. I mean, was that the case for you, or?
It's very complicated. So I was the first family, and my dad remarried, and so that can cause a few issues around that kind of thing, where the second family get things that the first family doesn't get, and all of that kind of stuff. So there can be a little bit of resentment that builds up, and then you have to work through those things and you release yourself from it. So those things can have an impact for sure. And, my relationship with my dad was a difficult relationship. He was highly strung. I'm a little highly strung. We're both musicians trying to write music and find our way. Yeah. And, even somebody, believe it or not, even somebody as successful as him had his challenges in the industry, because he had that level of success early on in his career, 1966 to 68 kind of, or 69. So like a 2.5 year period of time that Cream were in existence. And then subsequent to that, he had lots of amazing success, but never on that level. So he was always trying to find his way back, even if he was doing incredible jazz projects with Tony Williams and John McLaughlin or whoever, which stand the test of time as some of the greatest jazz music ever created. He was always chasing the level of fame that he'd had a taste of. So he had his struggles, and, you know, people didn't, the industry can be a pretty nasty industry. You know, if it chooses to turn its back on you, then suddenly it's like, wait a minute, I'm the guy that, you know, I invented this stuff, man. You know, we don't care because we like this guy better. We think this guy dresses better or looks better. So, you know, go away now, you know, but we'll take all your
spandex
stuff. Yeah, exactly. You don't look good in spandex, man. And it's the 80s, you know, get over yourself.
You're 20 years beyond spandex.
Shoot me from the waist up. No one will know. No, sorry. We need the full Monty.
Man,
no, I mean,
imagine if AI existed back then, man, that could have been a whole new career for people.
Well, you know, you never know. It might have already existed and just don't know. We've been zipped up in our pods and the holes were drilled, but part of it was to forget that was what's already happened. So we're just we're already in the hologram, man. We're already
in the Matrix.
Just consciousness. Yeah. Honestly, it is. But let's not go there because that would be a bit scary. But
that's the next podcast. Yes,
exactly. So I think my dad had his struggles, and also he was, you know, I think about this a lot. Like you're a human being, and especially the male of the species. Like there's an inevitable testosterone-based alpha-ish aspect to being a man, you know. And even in the dynamics of a family, the son kind of has to leave to go away and establish his thing somewhere else. And so, I think when you work, it's just like that we're animals, you know, there's an element of truth in that.
Yep.
Now, if you're really emancipated and resolved as a human, there can be a little bit of a better situation and a better dynamic. But generally speaking, from both perspectives, it's important to make that separation somehow. So when you're working with your dad and you're in the same industry, and anytime you do anything, oh, you're Jack Bruce's son. Oh. Oh, wow. Okay. What was it like growing up?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, question number 2. Hey,
which sometimes kind of makes doing these podcasts difficult because I don't want to ask you the same questions everybody's asking.
No, because I've worked very, very, very hard to go beyond all of that, like upsetness and all those things. You know, I think it's really, really essential. And maybe I'm lucky, you know, maybe it's been a great opportunity for evolution in that sense. I have not had an easy life so far. You know, people might think, oh, your dad was rich and famous. It must have been really easy for you. You say, Dad, buy me a car. Dad, I want a holiday. I want a house. I want a career, you know. Oh, yes, son, no problem.
Yeah.
Well, what else would you like?
Right.
You want a harem of beautiful women? That's not a problem. Just call this number. 1-800 be a famous person's son, you know, or whatever it is. Right. I mean, so like you have to get over all of that, and because that's not a real life. You know, you have to find your own way. So, you know, I can be honest about it. I've done therapy and I practice meditation. I do transcendental meditation and I do yoga, and I stay humble, even though I'm confident and I know that I've got infinite potential. I see everybody else in the same way. I don't think I'm better than somebody else because I might think, oh, maybe I've actualized myself in a certain way that other people so far haven't found that. Mm-hmm. But then I see other people that are much further on if we are to frame all that stuff in a linear progressive context. But really, we're all completely pure potential, you know. So that's the journey. And maybe that kind of abrasive relationship with my father and the challenges of trying to find my own self within a situation where he is taking up a lot of the space. Maybe that actually gave me an opportunity for growth, because I was confronted with a lot of stuff along the way. So I'm not saying I'm alone in that, but it has been quite a unique path so far, in that. So and as I say, like, I'm really feeling like I'm just the beginning of my journey creatively, and over the next period of my life, I'm going to really make some progress in that regard. So yeah, it's definitely came with its challenges. That relationship.
I mean, I can only imagine, and 99.999% of the world can only imagine what your situation must have been like. But you do have, so you have this foothold in Cream, and you have another foot in your solo work. And we're going to kind of go back and forth on this at this point, because there's this new Cream tribute album out, Heavenly Cream, which is a really different take on Cream's music. And you've done Cream tributes before with Kofi, with Will Johns, who's also on the podcast, Sons of Cream and the music of Cream. This one, Heavenly Cream, is much different, because those were a little more faithful to the heaviness and the virtuosity of Cream. And I feel like Heavenly Cream strips it down a little bit, not takes away some of the virtuosity, but maybe because you're stripping away the electric guitars and the bass and the insanity of the drums a bit, it focuses more on the songwriting of the band. And I think
absolutely, yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that gets lost, I feel, with the band, is the songwriting, because you had 3 virtuosic players there, which is also my theory is that's one of the reasons why they only lasted 2.5 years. You can't have those 3 personalities, those 3 virtuosos, as the only members of a band and expect it to last.
Yeah, I mean, it was a different time. They were kids. They were working class kids. Nobody had. I guess the Beatles had a level of success, but I don't think anybody could have predicted any of that stuff. And then for 3 musicians that were, as you say, they weren't pop stars. They liked fashion, but all of that kind of happened in a very short amount of time. I mean, I was looking up, there's this great photograph that somebody sent me of the Graham Bond organization.
Yeah,
that my dad was in and Ginger was in, Dick Axel Smith, who I knew very well, and Graham Bond on the Hammond organ and the sax, but they're all like spotty and wearing these like thin black ties and sort of mod looking suits and basically the geekiest band you could possibly, like, you wouldn't think that, like, that's like 1965, and then a year and a half later they were these kind of fashion icons.
Yeah,
because that's essentially what happened. They took the circuit that they developed with Graham, and they tried to have success with Graham, and they were hugely respected on the live circuit in the UK, but they weren't a pop act. And suddenly they kind of took that infrastructure, and then Eric became part of it, and it exploded. Yeah. But I'm not sure if it exploded in the UK in the same way that it did in America. I think that the success came from America, really, when it comes down to it. I think it's when they went over to the States and they did those early shows. Now I can't remember the guy's name, but the really famous DJ in New York that had a TV show, and Murray the K. I think Murray the K.
Oh, okay.
Name.
Yeah.
So they, I think suddenly they were doing tours, and it was a synchronous moment where you had the sort of hippie movement happening at the same time as this music that could lend itself to jamming, as we call it, but improvisation, and suddenly you're stretching out this music in all these different ways. It's kind of malleable, and the interaction with these audiences, and it just exploded, but they were just kids. So I don't know whether, you throw drugs on top of that, you throw huge success that they weren't prepared for. So I don't know whether, and also it's important to note, like Ginger Baker was a registered heroin addict before Cream.
Right.
So, he, one of the provisos of joining, it was Ginger's idea for Cream, and he went to Eric and said, do you want to put a band together? And Eric kind of said, yes, but it has to be Jack Bruce on bass. And even by that, I'm sure you know the story, but even by that point, Ginger and my dad had sort of been in those couple of bands together and fallen out, and weren't kind of talking at that point. So Ginger had to go to my dad and sort of say, oh, well, Eric wants you to be in the band. And my dad said, all right then, because they all loved each other, and they loved each other as musicians. But for whatever reason, Ginger and my dad, Ginger maybe he's like the elder brother that had to try and act a certain way. And my dad was like, don't tell me what to do. So I think there is all of those different dynamics going on. And Eric was, and still is to whatever degree, I would imagine, a musician that has a preference to certain kind of approach to music making. Yeah. I mean, the guy's a genius. It's not a criticism, but, he likes rootsy music. It's essentially the blues, but he's much more than just that term. Oh, yeah. But he likes roots music, and so Cream was suddenly this kind of jazz, like going off in these tangents that were a little bit like, whoa, for Eric. So I think for him, he probably, I think they all had, my dad's like composing incredible pieces of music and not really being understood in that context, but wanting to expand and express in all these different ways, I suppose, like I do as well. That's what I've inherited from him. Yeah. Whereas a lot of people in the business and musicians are like, okay, no, let's just keep this really narrow perspective on things. So I think there was a lot of different energies conflicting, and it was inevitable that it would implode. And by the end of the band, so I was, what the proviso that was that Ginger would have to give up taking heroin for the band to happen, which he did amazingly. Gave it up. But by the end of Cream, he was not giving it up again. But I mean, I love Ginger. I mean, I spent little bits of time with him. Obviously, it's Kofi's dad, and that's a whole different thing. But for me, I spent some really nice times with Ginger over the years, a little bit, the few times I was with him. And it was a great honor to do this record. He's on this record, Heavenly Cream. It's his final recording session. So
that's amazing.
And he played beautifully. But as you say, it's a completely different, it's not wailing solos and like, look at me and I'm wearing spandex. It's not that at all. I'm wearing really loose clothes, man.
I should subtitle this The Inevitability of Spandex. That should be the subtitle of this podcast.
It's the post-spandex era blues. It's a new Bob Dylan record. No, yeah. It is. I think just from that perspective, it's a lovely way of expressing the music, because it's not. I think you're absolutely spot on saying that you can lose the songwriting, not just from the playing, but also just the context of blues rock, blues music. It's so codified, and in my opinion, way too codified at this point. Yeah. It's so much potential that we're missing because of an expectation within musicians themselves, but also within the industry, and the people jump on things that sound the same as everything else because they think they can sell something, but it just doesn't work anymore. We've turned a corner. We need, like the 80s, we always used to make fun of the 80s, but when you look back at the 80s, every single band is completely unique. Each one has their own sound, and the singers were identifiable. The sound of their voices were identifiable, but now it's just so generic, so much of music,
And so many of those albums, there's so many different sounds going on. It's I think bands and artists were a little more willing to experiment still at that point, and they weren't pigeonholed. And you have to, you've got this ridiculous contract, so now you have to sell so many albums to recoup that so you don't owe the record company all kinds of money. So just stick with what sells. There's more.
I mean, that's a great. I don't know whether you saw there's an incredible documentary, 30 Seconds to Mars, a documentary about those guys.
Oh, no.
Jared, but with Irving Azoff at the time, he was their manager, and they are in litigation with their record label. I can't remember whether it's Sony or Universal, but they're kind of fighting them. And then they end up re-signing because they're in the middle of making a record, but should we pay for it ourselves or should we sign this deal? And the deal is like this 8,000 page document. It's a great bit where he's like Jared's turning the pages and signing. But at the end, there's a little text on the screen, I think, and it says, the album went 5 times platinum and they toured a stadium tour for 18 months and they still owe the record company, $500,000. And it's like, well, okay. So I mean, it is a crazy business these days in that sense. And so touring is the way to go. If you can sustain that, then you can make a living. But I think people do make money from Spotify if you can stream, if you can get, I think it's 3,000. Last time I checked, which was probably 3 or 4 years ago now, but I think it's something like $3,000 or $3,500 per million streams.
Yeah.
So if you got 10 million streams, that's like 30,000. If you got 100 million streams, that's 300,000. So if you're an Ed Sheeran or a Taylor Swift or whatever,
yeah.
But then it's such a strange thing because I noticed that with Ed Sheeran, not his most recent record, but he did a record which was duets with famous hip hop stars. And so every song had a different A-list rapper or hip hop artist or whatever. And so that meant that instead of it just being the Ed Sheeran stream on Spotify, suddenly they had all these other streams on Spotify. Okay, let's make a record where we can maximize our streaming.
He figured out, he beat the algorithms.
Yeah, I mean, but it's a little bit cynical to make music like that.
Oh, yeah.
Because it ends up being like ringtones. And Ed's he's a really talented guy and he's a really talented writer. But I just have a sneaking suspicion that because I've seen it, it's so easy to become very cynical, and go, okay, it's not art. Nah, forget about the art side. Just how much money can we make? And that's the first question. And then what are we going to do to make that money? And, it's a bit of a cynical approach, especially when it monopolizes the majority of the market and other people that are trying to actually have a career gig kind of get, I've got to work at Starbucks in order to have a career in music.
Yeah, especially for artists that maybe push the envelope and are trying to expand into different sounds and create something new and unique, as opposed to somebody who's doing something that, this will sell. So,
yeah.
So Heavenly Cream, let's dig into this a little bit because it's got so many amazing people on it. And for an album that, for the most part, kind of eschews the jammy extended solo side of Cream, there's incredible musicians on it. You're on 12 of the 15 tracks, and you do a little bit of everything.
I think I'm on all the tracks actually, but I'm not sure. I need to check.
Okay.
I haven't checked that for a while, but I'm playing. Yeah, I'm sort of in a supportive role, playing bass, guitar, and
vocals, and it's. For example, let me get my notes back up here because one of my favorite examples is Crossroads. Okay, I should have been able to pull that one out of my head. Crossroads, Bernie Marsden and Joe Bonamassa, but the song is it's distilled to under 3 minutes. Got these incredible players and they're playing beautiful stuff, but there's not the extended solos. So I really like how that kind of forces everybody to be a little more creative in different ways.
Yeah, I mean, Joe is an amazing guitar player. But yes, it's like, okay, let's strip this down to the feel of an acoustic guitar playing the riff, and his voice. So it's more focused on his approach to the vocal, which is nice. It's lovely it's refreshing to hear somebody like him in a different context, because he's always just wailing and he's brilliant at it. Great guitar player. And he's got all the tones, and that's what him and Bernie were friends. They both had guitar. Bernie had a very famous guitar collection, and he had a book made out of it. He had the famous Paul Kossoff Les Paul, and so they were sort of bonded over Les Paul. Les Pauls, really. So no, you're not allowed to play the Les Paul on this record.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's great. It's like, in a strange sort of way, to putting people in a different context and seeing what they'll come up with. But having said that, they're both consummate musicians, so it's not like the first time they played an acoustic guitar or something either.
Right. So, one of the other things that I like about the album is that not every song is one of the classic. I got to figure out where my hands are. With Zoom, yeah. I'm trying to do air quotes and it's not working. My hand's disappearing.
You've got the green screen going on as well. Is that part of Zoom, your green screen thing?
Yeah.
Your backdrop.
Yeah.
So I could have a backdrop as well.
Yep. You can change your background. So what it does is it does a little depth of field thing. And then, so what happened is one time.
If you go back, you went back and then you disappear. If you go back too far, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. Sometimes.
I had this position terribly. So I had this picture up with Maynard and Karina, but my microphone, which I don't know if you can, let me turn this a little bit. Wrong way. So my microphone is here, somewhere. There you go.
Oh, yes.
But it was positioned right in Karina's crotch by accident. So it was really bad. So you would see this big foam thing pop up right.
Did it on purpose. Come on.
And then it would look like I was leaning into her crotch to speak. So it was just terrible. So one of the reasons why I'm going to have to change this background at some point.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's also having kind of, this is an SM7, so it's that kind of iconic shape, but it isn't. Yes, it's a phallic. It is slightly phallic, even just on its own.
Yeah. Mine is a Sony from, I don't know where. I was given this one, so I don't know.
Oh, cool.
some cheap $50 mic.
That sounds good.
So, all right. So not every song on this is one of the big classic songs that you hear on classic rock radio, which like Sweet Wine, which I love this version of Sweet Wine. It is it's one of my favorites on the album.
Money, nothing funny, wasting the best of our lives. Sweet wine, hey, making sunshine, day breaking. We can't wait till tomorrow. Car speed road, calling bird free to leaf falling. We can buy time. Ba 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 ba.
Well, that song was co-written by my mother, Janet. So,
oh wow,
she actually wrote the words, and with Ginger writing the music. So she wrote 2 songs with Cream, Sleepy Time Time and Sweet Wine. So yeah, I love the song. I think there's something amazing about the architecture of the song as well, musically. It's got a really interesting structure that isn't blues. It's something completely different, isn't it, really? I think it's kind of it's almost like jazz or something. Jazz, that dirty word.
Yeah.
But it's something very different. And I think Cream is interesting in that there's a lot of diversity in the material, so as you say, like some of those more famous songs which are more bluesy. I mean, Sunshine of Your Love is like a blues basically it's a blues, the structure of it harmonically. But yes, Sweet Wine is definitely something that stands on it separate from that. And we did have like that little middle section that we recorded where it is a bit of a jam and it's one of the ones that Ginger's on. So that's really nice.
I wanted to say something real quick, and I don't know if this will make it or not, but you mentioned Sleepy Time, and I love that song. And that's when my wife and I had kids, that's the phrase we would use because of the Cream song to tell them to go to sleep. Hey guys, it's Sleepy Time. So
that's fantastic.
So
no,
Cream,
it is it, and it's the first original song that Cream had, actually.
Oh wow!
So my mum wrote the words and gave them to my dad, and he set them to music. And again, it's a blues, as you know, but it's a blues with a difference. It's got those little turnaround things. Yeah. It's really, really. There's a lot of sensitivity in the music. It's wonderful, actually. Yeah,
I love the song. So now my kids know Sleepy Time, and they'll use the phrase Sleepy Time now. So
fantastic.
So, all right, so back to the actual album. There's some other amazing people on it, like Deborah Bonham and Peter Bullock. Badge, one of my favorite Cream songs of all time. Let's just do a killer version of Badge. I love it. I love her voice. It's just, she's got this great rock and roll voice, and Peter's tone is just awesome.
Yes, I told you how the light goes up and down. Don't you notice how the wheels go round? And you better pick yourself up off the ground before they bring the curtain down. Yes, before they bring the curtain down. Ooh.
Yeah, I mean, Deborah's amazing. Actually, I'm doing a podcast with her next Monday. We haven't done any together, but apparently we're doing one together, so that'll be interesting. But yeah, she's great. And I guess we share a little bit of that thing of being related to someone famous and all of that stuff, you know. But she's wonderful. Yeah, it's great that she agreed to do it. And Peter's great.
He's a good
Yeah, I don't know him well, but he was in a band with a friend of mine called Terry, who was a bass player who passed away sadly. But Terry was in a band with Kofi in the 80s. Like when Kofi first started out, he had this band called 03 with a friend of mine called Alan, who I haven't spoken to in a little while, but Alan is a Cherokee Native American Indian living in northwest London.
Oh, wow.
I don't even know why he's living in, but I've known him since I was a kid. You know, I met him through Kofi because he had this band with this guy, Terry. Then I saw a picture, somebody sent me a picture of a band, you know, one of these kind of classic rock bands shots. I don't think it was a brick wall behind them, but it was close.
Oh,
you know.
Yeah.
And it was Terry with Peter Bullock. So, you know, so it's a small world, as you know.
It really, I was lucky enough to have Deborah and Peter on when their last album came out. So they were just a riot. It was just constant jokes. It was hilarious.
Yeah.
So, again, back to the album. You know, the reasons you're on here.
Okay.
How did this project started in 2017, I believe, right? And that's about the same time your solo album Salvation came out, which I thought was amazing. Take Me As I Am. That guitar riff, that's the kind of stuff that sticks in my head. So I love that song.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really end up promoting it enough. It was an interesting time for me. Like I'd fallen in love with a girl and then we split up. You know, when you split up with somebody and then you're kind of all heartbroken and all that stuff. And so a lot of that record's about that. But I was sort of traumatized. So I didn't, could I make the record again now? Can we just record it from scratch again and I'll do it better? You know, I think there's some really, like compositionally, I think there's some really great stuff on there. And the mixes are great. It's Steve Orchard mixed the record. Steve won a Grammy with, what's his name from Soundgarden, the singer from Soundgarden.
Chris Cornell.
Chris Cornell. I think he did I think it was this thing he did for the James Bond theme, maybe, or something like that. But anyway,
okay, yeah.
Steve is Paul McCartney's engineer. He's an incredible engineer. And so he mixed the record. So there's a lot of things I'm proud about it. But I think this new record that I'm working on is going to be more of a kind of definitive statement. And I will get fully behind it. It was also a really weird time. Like I did, part of the funding for Salvation was through Pledge Music.
Oh, yeah.
And as I'm sure you know, Pledge Music, right at the moment they're supposed to cut me the final check, went bust.
Yep.
And owed everybody money. Now, mine wasn't like, I made enough to kind of help. It was going to go into promoting the record, and, you know, but it literally, as I'm about to get everything prepared and send it all out, bang, Pledge owes everybody money. And that's, oh, sorry, we can't give you your money. And it's like, okay, thanks. You know?
Yeah, I have a couple friends in the band Failure, and they went through the same thing. Through Pledge Music, it was their album came out, and as soon as everybody's like, hey, the album was supposed to ship last week, and I haven't gotten it yet. Anybody know? And then Failure had to go out and reach out to everybody and be like, okay, so we just found something out. So the Pledge Music doesn't really exist anymore.
I mean, I have a list of, I do have like a small list of people that they're still really owed some of the kind of higher end pledges. So, you know, but that's what I'll basically give them a bunch of free stuff on my next record just to kind of make up for it. But, you know, there's only so much you can do with a situation like that.
It's out of your control.
I don't know whether crowdfunding has had its day. I mean, some people, if you talk to some people, they'll say crowdfunding isn't really the way to go anymore. But I still think it has a place. I think it's a really useful tool, and even major labels use it. You know, just the idea of, I mean, even just pre-ordering. I mean, for this record, Heavenly Cream, people can pre-order it.
Why the 5-year gap between the start of the project and the release date? I mean, obviously we had kind of a pandemic going on, but was that the only reason, or was there anything else behind it?
I don't really know. I mean, I think a lot of it is to do with the pandemic. Yes, they started talking about doing the record in 2017, and then we actually were in the studio in 2018.
Okay.
And Mark Waters, a film director, he came and shot a sort of feature-length documentary about the making of the project.
Oh, wow.
With interviews and all kinds of stuff. So that's available for streaming. So I think that, you know, a combination of when you have a record and you go through the process of making a record and then you mixing the record and mastering it. So that's a little bit of doesn't have to take 5 years, obviously, but maybe a period of time where you have a strategy or whatever. But if you're also making a documentary, then that's a much bigger, in my experience, you know, editing something of that nature takes a lot longer than a record on its own.
Yeah.
So I think, yes, by the end of 2019 going into 2020, we were hit by the pandemic, and I would imagine that did affect the label's decision making. It was, you know, it's all down to the label choosing the right time. Maybe there were. Well, Quarter Valley is an amazing label. It's like a little label, but they have some great things, and they won the Grammy earlier this year with Edgar Winter's record, and so you know, maybe awesome. Yeah. So maybe the Grammy for Blues. So maybe the nature of that label is that they're kind of focused on one main project at a time, and they just thought, let's wait through the I don't know how active what they were doing during the pandemic. I wasn't really paying attention. I was paying attention to. What was I paying attention? I don't know. The Wall. That's it. No. No, but I mean, it did. I think, you know, that's the next podcast when we talk about all the conspiracy stuff, conspiracy facts, as I like to call it.
I like it.
You know, but it was a challenging time for all of us, and so I'm sure that had an impact on why it's taken this long. And it's unfortunate because we have lost, you know, we've lost Pete Brown and Ginger, obviously, and Pee Wee Ellis has passed away, and Bernie Marsden literally left a few weeks ago. So
yeah.
So we've lost all those people that were a core part of the project, which is a shame. You know, we can celebrate them, and you know, it's a lovely testament to who they are, and you know, just a nice kind of thing to have, you know, in terms of their memory.
Oh, for sure. And the album wraps up with Paul Rodgers. I mean, the thing that I love about Paul Rodgers is that he could do anything, and it just sounds like a Paul Rodgers song. I mean, who else can take Born Under a Bad Sign and make it their own? I mean, he's just got this smoothness to his voice. Even when he's belting it out and being real bluesy, there's just still this smoothness to his voice. It's just, and his inflections, you just know it's Paul.
Well, born under a bad sign, I've been down since I began to crawl. If it weren't for bad luck, I would have no luck at all. Hard luck and trouble has been my only friend. I've been on my own ever since I was 10. Born under a bad sign. I've been down.
Well, I think that's the mark of a great singer, a contemporary singer. I mean, it's interesting, that stuff, isn't it? Like, you listen to opera singers and you tend to not be able to distinguish in the same way that a pop singer, and you can call Paul a pop singer in that sense. He's a singer that sings popular songs.
Right.
And I think all great singers of that nature, you know, that by their very nature, they have that versatility, you know, the ability to sing within different genres. And obviously Paul is known for being this kind of singer.
Yeah.
But he's done a great deal of different things over the years. And, you know, again, what's fun about this record is putting these people in a different context, perhaps. I imagine that Paul, like my dad and everyone at that kind of generation, were growing up listening to, you know, Albert King or whoever it was that was doing those songs, you know. So, yeah. So it's like the next generation along, and those were the things that they loved hearing, you know. I mean, I think the one of the few times I impressed my dad was when I was in Nashville and I came back to the UK and saw him at Christmas or something, and I said, guess what? I got to spend 2 days working with Little Richard in the studio, which I did. Oh, and he was like, really? You know, because it was like those kind of people were the people that were famous when my dad was first coming through.
Right.
To us, it's like we're sort of separated by all these generations, but I don't know who would it be that we would be impressed with.
Oh yeah, I mean,
I got to work with Ed Sheeran.
Yeah,
for 2 days in the studio. Really
nice, not very nice. Taylor Swift.
Oh, he's great. They're all great. Everyone's great. We love everybody.
Exactly. Everybody, even you, Bill. So,
we love you, Bill. We're just concerned that you don't love us. That's the problem.
He's an avid listener of this podcast, I will say.
Okay, good. Well, if you're tuning in, Bill, we love you, but we're concerned that you don't love us.
So you've got some other projects that you're working on in the future. You've got, like you've mentioned, the new album coming out in 2024, and you're also a contemporary classical composer working on operas.
Yeah.
What's up next for you? You got the solo album. Is that?
Yeah, I'm still in the middle of creating it. I've recorded about 15 songs. I'm writing a bunch of new stuff. It's called Fake Humans and Real Dolls. There's, in my own way, like quite a lot of social commentary. It's such an interesting time to make a record. Or my experience of it right now is like, I'm always constantly reassessing what is it that I'm trying to say, with a record like this. And at this time in my life and this time in history, it's crazy, isn't it? I mean, it's such a crazy time. As we were saying before, like, do we just stick our head in the sand and ignore what's going on in the appearance, the external, or do we somehow view it but not lose ourselves and not get angry? These are the challenges. How do we express things? How do we make the world a better place without hitting each other over the head with a hammer or shouting or saying I'm right and you're wrong? And like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
Because we're a bunch of idiots.
Yeah.
We're embarrassing ourselves. The human race is embarrassed, whether it's racism or prejudice or ridiculous narratives that we buy into. And it's all just, none of it means anything. The only important thing is tolerance and the development of self-awareness, but it's not about saying this is right and this is wrong, or like who knows. There's no answer to that because the whole thing is subjective. So I think, in terms of writing, that's how do we say all of that? I don't know. So I'm just kind of trying to figure it out as I go along. So yes, that's the most important pressing thing that I'm doing at the moment, but I'm also just practicing the piano and classical repertoire, and I'm studying jazz and writing a jazz record for next year.
Okay. Oh,
which
awesome.
will probably end up being like a piano trio type thing. But that word jazz is a strange word as well.
It depends who you mention it to. A lot of different reactions. Yeah.
It's not jazz. What? Oh, you mean it's jazz? Yeah, no, it's jazz. Just jazz. Just jazz. It's thinking people's pop music. No, it's not thinking people's pop music. It's unthinking people's pop music.
I don't want people to think. We've had too much of that lately.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm just, I'm in the moment exploring, and really at the moment, to be totally frank, my priority is meditation. I practice TM meditation, and that informs everything, because that is allowing my mind to settle into the quantum level of experience, which then, so yeah, I mean, it's, it doesn't belong to me. It's part of who we are, but most of us are functioning on this kind of superficial level, and we don't understand the full experience of who we are. And then all the problems are starting. So I think if there's the notion of responsibility, it's to get fully in touch with ourselves, the full range of who we really are, because that puts everything into perspective, and it can then inform action and behavior in a much more spontaneous way, rather than trying to do something or trying to maintain a sense of self. That can loosen and fall away, and then it can just be what's happening, man. And that's, so to me, that's the priority, really, to kind of have that humble experience of the self as a regular experience, and then around that will inform what I do in my life, whether it's being kind to somebody else or communicating with people in a healthy way, not getting caught up in trying to be right all the time and all of that kind of stuff. Just be in my process. And of course, I do have a large selection of automatic weapons and a massive gate around my home. Apart from that, it's all peace and love.
Exactly, peace and love, baby. I did read something which really fascinated me, and I'm excited to hear it, and I hope you're continuing to develop this, is King Yu's folly.
Yes.
That based on Baozi. Is that my pronunciation?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, my Chinese pronunciation is hopeless. I did bump into a Chinese girl the other day, and we talked about it. And she's from Hong Kong, but she's Chinese from Hong Kong, and so she kind of put me on, because I was trying to explain, what it was, and she's like, oh, I don't really know. So then I kind of showed her online, and she goes, oh, she, I can't do it, but I understand what you're saying. Right. I don't think it's correct. So what we need is like we need Google pronunciation check. Oh, that's what we need. I think Bill, if you're listening, can you put that out as an app, please, instead of genetically modifying my brain? Could you just, instead of doing that, could you just make an app for correct pronunciation? I'm sure they must have it already.
Oh yeah. So what I'll probably do,
GPT.
So what I'll probably do is I'll have Google pronounce it, and then I will overlay that over my pronunciation.
Exactly. You can just go back and fix it in the mix.
Exactly. But
fix it in post.
You are still working on that then?
Yes. Oh, I'm actually awesome. I've got 3 libretti, as we call them. So 3 scripts that I've got developed. That is the biggest one. I also worked with a playwright who's passed away, but his pseudonym is Peter Wolf. And we wrote together a libretto about racism in Louisiana in the South.
Oh, wow.
Based on it's kind of a blues opera. It's been done a little bit before, but this is a particularly unique take on a contemporary classical music opera, but based on the blues.
Oh, wow.
And this guy, I was reading, actually my family gave me a book of interviews with Studs Terkel, And Studs Terkel was a famous radio DJ in Chicago who maybe died 10, 15 years ago at the age of 102 or something. And he lived this incredibly long life. And he was very left-leaning, but he used to interview all kinds of people, so famous opera singers and obscure blues musicians. And so one of the interviews in this book is with this guy called Emmanuel Dunn, who was a blues singer, but he grew up in a white family in Louisiana, and he didn't really understand why, but he didn't have a name. So then they were a farming family. So the white father just used to call him boy. Hey boy, Yeah. But he would eat at the table with the two siblings who were white, but he was this black kid. But the father was really cruel, violent towards him. And there's this incredibly moving, awful story, like where he says the wrong thing, and the father straps the plow on his back and forces him to plow the field. Whoa. And so anyway, his mother kind of gives him like $5 and says, run away. So he literally ran away, and he's like a 9-year-old kid.
Oh my God.
And he ends up living under a house, a black family's house in Louisiana. He goes through the swamps, and he survives, and all of this stuff happens to him, and he ends up living, and he kind of befriends this girl, and he names himself Emmanuel and teaches himself. He builds his own musical instruments out of like rubber tires and all this stuff, and taught himself to play music and sing the blues. And he's an incredible artist.
Good.
And very obscure. So anyway, so that's a whole opera that I'm developing. And then more recently, I've just finished another script based on an H.G. Wells short story called A Story of the Stone Age, which is, people think of H.G. Wells as a kind of future, always looking into the future, but this is looking 50,000 years into the past in the south part of the UK, when you could still walk through marshland from Surrey, England to France, because there wasn't a sea there, it was just marshland. But yes, that's a kind of love story between two Stone Ages, as I like to call them. They're like Stone Ages. And it's got singing horses and singing bears, and it's
sounds amazing.
So yeah, just I like the expanded sense of a palette and a big stretch of a span of time to make some kind of statement. I'm just developing these ideas, but I'm really excited about them. But it doesn't, writing an opera takes a little bit of time. It doesn't. Don't get it done in a couple of weeks. So
that's what I've heard.
So I'm still, yeah. I mean, I'm learning. I'm just learning as I go. But I'm excited about the process. Well,
this sounds amazing, and Heavenly Cream is coming out. In fact, by the time this airs, it'll be out. So what is the best way for people to find the album and follow you on social media and keep track of all your projects?
Well, yeah. So that is, you can go on Quarto Valley Records. You can also go on propermusic.com and do a search for Heavenly Cream. That's the distribution company. And it's all, you can get the CD, the download. I think it's November 24th. The double vinyl package is coming out as well. So if you're into that kind of thing, that's available as well. I believe the documentary is already available to stream, but I don't have the details for where that is.
Okay.
People can do a search for that. I'm sure it'll come up. And that's called The Cream Acoustic Sessions. That's the name of the documentary. And then for me, malcolmbrucemusic.com, but I'm also on all the social media sites, Facebook. I'm also on X, formerly known as Twitter, and I'm on Instagram, and I'm also on Threads, man.
Oh, because yeah,
I just made a Threads account. It's like really great.
I did that too, and I don't ever use it.
I've noticed not many people using it yet.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Like at the moment, every time I go on it, they write themselves a message saying, "Dear algorithm, please could you connect me with, like-minded people that like carrot juice, people that don't spread hate, people that communicate properly, people that don't steal people's money, whatever it is."
Yeah. I don't know if that works or not, but I have seen that too. So
yeah, I haven't tried it yet, but yeah, people can find me. I don't know, everywhere. I'm omnipotent, the same as everybody else.
And all those links are on malcolmbrucemusic.com, so it might be a shortcut to finding that too. So, but this has been a blast. Thank you so much for spending so much time and extending these sessions, because I had so much fun.
Oh, Mark, it's been great. Yeah, I'd love to do some more with you at some point.
I would love that.
Put the world to rights or whatever.
We shall.
When the wagons leave the city for the forest and further on, painted wagons of the morning, yeah, dusty roads where they have gone, sometime traveling through the darkness, met the summer